All right, I moved the microphone a little closer to me, so hopefully the audio is a little bit better on this one. We're going to go ahead and start looking at functions from chapter 4. And functions work just like they do in any other programming language. So if you've had another programming language before, then you should be familiar with the concept. But the great thing about functions, not only do they allow us to organize where our code goes, we can put them up in the head section and always know where the bulk of our code is. We can put them in external documents that hold lots and lots of different functions that we can call from time to time as needed. We can call them from multiple pages and create little libraries of code that we use over and over again. For example, if you're going to validate a form to see if an email address is in the correct format or something like that, if you have a website that has 64 forms on it, instead of writing the code 64 times inside that one, inside each document, what you can do is you can have a validate email function that lives in this external document, and you can call it as needed. But what we're going to do is we're going to start simple here, because the other thing you can do that's pretty cool with functions is you can control when they execute. So in our previous examples, if we put the script tag in here and had document.write this is the message, well, we weren't really able to control when that executed. The browser would get to here, of course, if I close my script tag, it would get to this point, it would see that line of code and it would execute it and then move on to the next thing it was supposed to do. But with functions, what we can do is we can tie functions to user interaction. If a user clicks a button, and we'll work on that in a later chapter, then you can call your function at that time. If something else happens, you can call the function whenever you want to. The other thing it allows you to do is to put your code up in the head section, and then wherever you want the output to appear, you call the function and tell the browser to run the code at that point. So in this example, what I have is I have just a basic HTML page. I have some text on here. Welcome to the page. I want some content here before I call the function. Load more content, about ready to call the function. And then bam, I want my message to show up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my function up in the head section of the document. When you create a function, you're going to use the command function, and notice that it is lowercase. A real common error starting out with using functions is to use a capital F, but it is a lowercase function. And then you make up the name, and the name is going to be very similar to, the naming conventions are pretty much the same as they are for variables. So I'm going to name this print message. You're always going to have those parentheses there. If you're not going to receive or return parameters, then they'll be blank. And then all of the code that is going to be packaged up in this function is surrounded by curly braces. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a very simple thing. I'm going to document.write a message. I'm going to put a p tag in. And actually, let's add a style to it. We're going to make the color be red. Now, before I move on, I'm going to, first of all, I have a typo, but I also have an issue here. And you need to pay attention to this, particularly when you're using parameters and things. You're going to have to pay attention to your quotes and double quotes. So normally, if we were writing out regular HTML, we would have style equals color, red, red, surrounded by our double quotes. But this is problematic when we combine this with JavaScript, because notice for my document.write to literally write the string, I've used double quotes there. And what happens is JavaScript sees that first double quote, reads along, hits this second double quote, and thinks that it's closing that double quote there instead of opening a new one. And so it closes it, and then it just sees color red outside on its own, which is not correct. JavaScript throws syntax error, your code doesn't work. So what you have to be really aware of is if you're going to use these double quotes together, you have to alternate using double quotes and single quotes. So if I'm opening double quotes For the literal that I want to print with the document.write method, my style here has to change to a single quote. Okay, so then I'm just going to have, look, it is from a function. Again, this is not the most useful code in the world. And so I close my quotes, close my parentheses, and then go ahead and put my semicolon in. So all this is going to do when this runs, the browser is going to hit the script tag and it's going to see that it's in a function, and it's going to tell itself, hey, no, look, I don't run that code now. I only run that code when I see the function call somewhere else that tells me, hey, go find the instructions for print message and run them. So it goes about its business. It goes ahead and loads up the page, puts my H1 and my P tags in. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up a script tag in the body where I want the output to be, and I'm going to call the function. And the way you call the function is you just tell it the name of the function that you want to call. And so now the browser sees this. It sees a function call and it says, oh, okay, I know where those instructions live. It goes back to the head section of the document, finds that script tag, finds the instructions, and then follows it. So let's go ahead and save this as, let's say, function call.html. And then I'm going to switch over to my browser. I think I have a browser open here somewhere. Switch over to my browser. I'm going to do Control-O and go to open up our function call, and then we see what we pretty much expected. We have our content that we put in there statically, and then we have our dynamic content coming from our function. And so the cool thing about this, if I go back here, is I can come in here and I can put more content. So I'm just going to copy that. And then I can run the script over and over again if I want to. I can actually, inside the script, call the function multiple times. And so that code is reusable, and instead of doing everything down here in the body, I can run that code as many times as I wish and control where my output is going to show up. So that's a pretty straightforward function. It doesn't have any parameters. In other words, when we call the function, we're not sending the information into the function that it needs to know. And then on our output, we're not returning a value. We're just having execute code. So we're going to go ahead and do that in our next example. We're going to modify our currency conversion function that we used in the last chapter. We're going to move our code from the body up to a function, and then we're going to create the function call and send the value to be converted. So that's it for this video. We'll move on to the next one right now.